Reading is brought to you by Strong Women, Strange Worlds, a group of authors supporting authors. Our mission is to elevate the voices of women and other underrepresented gender identity authors of science fiction, fantasy, and horror through events like this bi-monthly virtual quick read sessions. You can find out more about Strong Women, Strange Worlds in the handout that'll be popping up in your chat window over there, and by visiting the website, strongwomenstrangeworlds.weebly.com. So I'm your host today, Elaine Isaak, and you can find out more about me in the provided handout as well. Unfortunately, one of our scheduled authors has come down with COVID. So today we'll be featuring 5 authors instead of 6. Our 5 authors today are Jenn Gott, Elaine Pascale, Leah Bobet, J.F. Garrard, and Cerece Rennie Murphy. Each author will have about 8 minutes to read. Our first reader today is Jenn Gott. Jenn Gott is an author, fangirl, and jack of all hobbies. She lives in a fairy tale forest where, when she's not writing, you can usually find her playing life simulation games, sketching, or entertaining her rambunctious cat. Over to you, Jenn.
Thank you so much. So some quick context. Jane is a comic book artist who created a superhero team based off her childhood friends and the powers they'd all imagined for themselves. At the start of the book, she's asked to meet them, only to find them in full costume as those heroes. Before she gets any answers, though, some monsters appear, there's a fight scene, and one sci-fi zippy-zap later, she wakes up in what looks like their fictional headquarters, which is where this scene picks up. Does someone want to start telling me what the hell is going on here? Marie and Tony and Cal all looked at each other. Don't ask me, man, Tony said to Cal. You're the one that brought her here. He leaned back on the couch, crossing one leg over the other. He was holding an expensive-looking drink, and now he took a pull from it, ice cubes clinking. Cal rubbed the back of his neck, like a boy trying to work up the courage to ask someone to the prom. Technically, we all agreed. Only because you told us that their world was exactly like ours, Marie cut in, that we were all there. But this, she threw her arm in Jane's direction, is not the Jane I know. Jane flinched back under the burst of attention, everyone sneaking in a quick glance, sizing her up. It was clear from their expressions that they did not like what they saw. She felt disconnected from herself, seeing the lounge from a distance. She was small, bleeding into the edges. The light fell in the middle of the room, at Tony on the couch with his bright amber drink, at Marie in her monochrome of gray slacks and white sweater, her hair stained fluorescent by the light of the aquarium. Even Cal, in dark jeans and a muted t-shirt, seemed to gleam from his teeth and his sun-blonde hair. Here, in this setting, they felt larger than themselves. They felt like symbols of justice and liberty, of hope. Jane was the cloud of doom, the dark shading that threatened to creep in and snuff them out. Finally, Cal sighed. It might be easier to show you, he said, as he tapped a space just beside the bank of windows. Drawing this transition always used to frustrate Jane. The windows appeared as a solid wall when the blinds were shut, but melted away upon touch, first breaking into neat, slim panels like slats of a white picket fence. Then pieces would begin to break off, shimmering as they broke into smaller and smaller bits of dust, before fading into the depths of what was now clear and perfect glass. The city spread out beyond, as familiar as the back of Jane's hand. The view from their headquarters had been lifted directly from work. The one that Jane was looking at now was how it would appear from the break room. Jane had sat at a table and sketched this panorama 100 times. The sharp peaks of City Hall, stained orange in the setting sun. Regent Park, a 3-block square cut right out of the heart of the metropolis. The river, flitting in and out of view in the distance. Jane approached the window with caution. Night had blanketed the city. 1,000 lights winked through a shifting haze of smog, muddying the familiar landscape, but it was still enough. The park, City Hall, the skyline she'd committed to both memory and paper so many times over. Only one piece was different, a gap like a missing tooth in the heart of downtown. Several key buildings were just gone, leaving nothing but twisted, blackened metal that rose like skeletal trees after a wildfire. Jane touched the window, the glass cool beneath her fingers as she traced their lines. What happened? Dr. Demolition happened. Cal had come to stand behind her, his reflection hovering past her shoulder. I don't know how to tell you this, Jane, but you're on a parallel world. 3 weeks ago, Dr. Demolition developed a deadly weapon, one with the power to destroy a whole city block. We tried to stop him. We finally discovered where he was keeping it, but when we got there, he'd already moved it, Jane said. She was still staring out at the cityscape, her eyes instinctively seeking out the major landmarks. Along the edge of the gap, she spotted it. She pointed, her finger pressed against the glass. To there, the top of Woolfolk Tower. It wasn't much of a tower anymore. Half melted, nothing but a handful of twisted girders. Jane sought out Cal's eyes in the reflection. I'm right, aren't I? Cal nodded. Shock was written plain on his face. You're right. How did you? Because I wrote it. Jane turned around, putting the view to her back. Or I was going to write it anyway. That's the start of the Spectral Wars storyline. The first issue just came out. This time, it was everyone else's turn to look confused and incredulous. Marie pushed herself off the aquarium. You think this is some kind of game? Not a game, Jane said. A story. My story. Our story, she corrected herself in her head. But that wasn't worth getting into right now. Besides, Claire had never liked to claim credit, even in private, even when the best ideas were hers. Spectral Wars had been hers. The beginning of it, anyway. Jane never got to learn Claire's ending. She swallowed down the lump of remorse that had risen in her throat. Cal held up his hand, cutting off Marie before she could start again. Well, it's real here. Dr. Demolition is real, and so is the damage he's done. Jane couldn't help it. She laughed. Just once, just enough to get a death glare from Marie. Sure it is. And I suppose now you're going to tell me that you're really Captain Lumen. A wave of confusion crossed Cal's model-perfect face. No, Jane. You are. That's all I've got for you today. If you'd like to see what happens next, I am going to be giving away ebook copies of both this book and the sequel. Book 3 is going to come out this summer, so it's a great time to jump into the series. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jen. That was fantastic. Everybody was really involved. So cool to see a writer's creations come to life, although I can understand it would be pretty disconcerting from the inside. So our next reader, our second reader, is going to be Elaine Pascale. Elaine is the author of The Bloodlights, If Nothing Else, Eve, We've Enjoyed the Fruit, and The Thin Contract. She is also the editor of Dancing in the Shadows, a tribute to Anne Rice. Her writing can be found in numerous anthologies and magazines. Over to you, Elaine.
Thank you very much.
From one Elaine to another.
The beginning of part 2 of The Bloodlights. The chapter I selected can serve as a standalone story. At this point in The Bloodlights, women and girls have been affected by the lights, which gives them zombie-like characteristics. Part 2, Caitlin, Sing the Beasts Away. October 19, 2021. The girl is screaming. She's screaming and running, but no sound can be heard. She's in a dark place, both literally and metaphorically, and she does not understand either. She believes she blacked out. She does not remember crawling into this gloomy space, yet the stinging pain coming from her knees and palms narrates an experience of crawling. The smell where she's located is indescribably bad, but it does nothing to staunch her hunger. She wishes she had left her father's laptop alone. More than that, she wishes she had not sent the video to Molly. She'd instructed Molly not to watch it, just to keep it as evidence for if something bad happened to her, for when something bad happened to her. She trusted Molly, but she knew that curiosity killed the cat. She knew that now more than ever. Without the video, she would have never entered a dark place alone. She had always been too afraid. She'd spent most of her life fearing imaginary creatures like vampires and ghosts. She had mostly feared the gunny wolf. Just imagining his empty eyes and long teeth had been enough to put her in tears as a child. As a little girl, she had practiced her lullabies as a means of putting the dreaded beast to sleep. Her mother had taught her the sweetest songs, ones that had carried her to safe dreams as a small child. Without the video, she would not be where she was. She would not fear what she now feared. She could not explain with any satisfaction why she'd even watched it. To spite her parents? To further anger her already angry father? To further guilt her already guilty mother? She'd watched the video. She'd seen the lights. Then her throat had begun to feel thick and itchy, a deeply pervasive itch that could not be scratched because there was no way to scratch the air inside of her mouth and windpipe. The itch was accompanied by an insane hunger. Caitlin had gone to the living room sofa where her mother sat watching Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune or one of those game shows that makes the viewers at home feel superior to the sacrificial lambs, sweating it out under lights in front of cameras in the hopes of small, temporary windfalls. Oh, how lights can change the world. Caitlin had begun complaining to her mother about the throat itchiness, the eye puffiness, and the lip tingliness. She'd whined about being so very hungry. Her mother had pretended not to hear and had sipped her martini and stared at the show with a staged intensity. During the commercial, Caitlin had tried again. She gasped out to her mother that she could no longer swallow, that it was becoming difficult to breathe, that she would take herself to the hospital if she had her license and were not afraid of blacking out on the way. Must it always be about you? Her mother snapped, still refusing to look at her swollen and distressed child. I had a very long day, came home, cooked supper, and started the laundry, and now I just want to sit for a few minutes. She took another sip of the quickly dwindling drink. Selfish, she muttered. Selfish? Yes, Caitlin had been selfish for wanting a specific type of cake for her 6th birthday. She'd been selfish for wanting her mom to open the present Caitlin had made for Christmas 1st. She'd been selfish for wanting her mom to attend her school concert, in which Caitlin had a solo. But she had not been nearly as selfish as the parent who put the bottle before her child's needs. Caitlin had sprung from the couch, not so much from her mother's words, as from the fact that her entire body had been burning with hives. She ran outside into the darkness, only to find herself, sometime later, making her way through the dank tunnels beneath her hometown. October 24, 2021. The girl is crying. She's crying, but because she's nearly dehydrated, no tears fall. She's dehydrated because she can keep no food or liquid down. Her mother tried bringing soup to the shed where she is kept. It is safer for everyone if she is contained. Her mother tried bringing her calamine for the itchy boils, but nothing can stop the itching or the hunger. When Caitlin had returned home, she overheard her parents arguing. How could you have brought that into our home? Her mother's voice was soft from crying. It's bad enough you're on that island. We didn't know this would happen. You mean, Rick, you didn't know there'd be tourists. You did know that people lived there. You did know they would be affected. Her father had said nothing. But then you brought it home. You brought it into our home, those damn lights. And now Caitlin, her father had not been able to defend himself. He could not argue in favor of the existence of the video, so her mother had thrown him out. For the first time, Caitlin had realized that her mother was not as weak as her father. She'd been wrong. Her mother had a blunt strength, especially when she was sober. This realization had allowed Caitlin to put herself in her mother's care in the dark tool shed. At times, the few items that remained in the shed cast menacing shadows. Caitlin would sing lullabies to those darkened illusions, hoping to sing any phantom beast to sleep. The hunger grew, and her mother decided that soup was not the answer. The woman began bringing raw meat into the shed. While disgusted by the prospect, the meat smelled wonderful. They soon learned that she could not digest the meat, but could swallow any blood she was able to squeeze from it. What Caitlin craves is something warm and alive, something to hunt, something that'll tug against her. She finds herself salivating when her loyal dog is sniffing at the shed. She finds herself wanting to lure him inside, wanting to pet him until he falls asleep, and then her mother seems to understand. The yard is littered with creatures brought in from shelters. At night, Caitlin's released and allowed to hunt. At first, the animals seem to satisfy. The boils become smaller, and she's able to focus on things beyond her hunger. After some time, her hunger evolves. The animals cannot keep up with her demands. Even the rabbits that have been multiplying like rabbits were not enough. October 30, 2021, the woman is singing. She's singing as she walks into the yard she knows so well. For decades, she's hung laundry in that yard, played with her daughter in that yard, sunbathed and gardened. It was a place of contentment until it became a place of confinement. This time she could not hide behind a bottle. She could not hide at all. So she sings. She sings as she opens the door to the shed and unleashes the girl she barely recognizes, but still loves so terrifyingly. She sings as she walks into the girl's arms, understanding fully that she would never be able to sing this particular beast to sleep. Thank you.
Wow, Elaine, that was fantastic. I got chills. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So our third reader today is Leah Bobet, novelist, editor, and critic. Leah Bobet's latest novel, An Inheritance of Ashes, won the Sunburst and Aurora Awards and was an OLA Best Bets book. Her short fiction and poetry are anthologized worldwide. She lives in Toronto, where she builds civic engagement spaces and makes quantities of jam. Over to you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to read a little bit of the first chapter of Ashes, going to just dive right in. The barley was in. The stubble of it lay, bent broke in the fields, as far as the eye could see. Rows of golden soldiers endlessly falling from the river to the blacktop road. On a clear evening, with the harvesting done, you could see both river and road from the farmhouse porch, every acre lined in sunset light of Roadstead Farm. So I was the first to see him. Everyone claimed a sighting in the stories that grew up later. A dark man with a dark walk, striding bravely through the dying grain fields. But it wasn't like that. I was the first to see the stranger when he came to the lakelands, and he stumped up the road like a scarecrow stuffed with stones. Martha's chimney smoke drifted to meet him, a thin taste of home fires. He caught its scent, his head tilted into the breeze, and hesitated at the weathered signpost where our farm began. It can't be, I thought, breathless. And then he straightened and strode up the gravel path to our door. For a moment, I forgot the argument Martha and I had just had, every vicious thing I'd said to my sister. I leaned forward, fingers wrapped around the porch rail, and squinted at the silhouette ghosting through our fields, the fields Tom and I had planted together before the men marched off to war, the fields I'd harvested alone, and was still working alone, plowing them under for the winter, when I wasn't having pointless, nasty arguments with Martha over nothing more than a heel of bread. No, I told myself, it was about more than the stupid bread. It was about everything. I'd known right away that asking was a mistake. Martha had been wrestling with the autumn canning since sunrise, as behind on our winter stores as I was on the woodpile, and the second the word bread came out of my mouth, her face fell into put upon fatigue. And suddenly I couldn't bear to hear her tell me for the 1000th time, like I was a slow child and not half owner of Roadstead Farm. Hallie, I need you to try harder. One more chore before I could taste a bite of supper because Tom was gone and the war had killed half our harvest. Because of the November wind outside, the woodpile that wouldn't get us past January, the snarled hole in the chicken coop that let the foxes in. Every time she said it, I could see the disappointment in her eyes. Self-centered, childish, useless Hallie. Hallie, not strong enough. I'm trying, okay? I pleaded, exhausted, hungry, cold. Martha stared down at me, sweat-smeared and impatient, no mud on her boots and no sympathy in her eyes. She doesn't understand, I realized. And then it hit me. She doesn't care. It's easy for you to say, I shouted, wild with hurt. It's not you out there working yourself dead. Martha stiffened. She put down her cheesecloth, slow. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She was just in the kitchen, working herself dead, 7 months round with Tom Clarland's child. The doorway stood deadly quiet between us, as wide as the wound of Tom's missingness. And then my sister did something she had never done in the 6 years since Papa's funeral. She shut the door in my face. I stared at that door for a full minute before it sank in. We'd finally gone too far. It had been 8 years since the fight that ended things between Papa and Uncle Matthias. 8 years since my uncle went his lonely way. Martha and I, at this rate, we wouldn't even make it to my 17th birthday. But none of it mattered if Tom was finally home. The wind stirred my hair, stirred the edges of that ragged silhouette in the broken barley fields. Please, I thought, be Tom. Not some man 2 inches too tall who was walking all wrong, who didn't wave to me. I let myself believe it for 30 delicious seconds before I let the truth in. It wasn't Tom. Just another veteran coming up the road with a family who was waiting and wouldn't have to wait much longer. Just another stranger. The man set his pack 5 feet from the porch rail in the soft gravel and dust. He was full grown, but not long to it. 23 or 4 and long with muscle, his brown forearms 3 shades paler than Tom ever got. He huddled before me in a red-checked flannel work shirt, worn threadbare, useless against the chill November breeze. My breath puffed out. It was plain what he wanted. He had a soldier's sleeve buttons, and his boots were in ribbons. We've nothing to spare, I muttered, too distracted to say it louder. He wasn't Tom. Martha was still furious, and I was still in trouble. I stared into the dirt at his feet. Please, please go away. You might try the Masons down the road. He neglected to pick up his pack immediately, turn around, and never be seen again. Instead, he took off his cap. There was a shock of black hair beneath it, pulled back in a cattleman's tail. Thank you, he said, quiet for such a big-shouldered man. But I'm actually hoping to hire on. I blinked. The barley was in. Anybody could see that. I'm quick with my fingers, he kept on. He had an accent more suited to the wild country northward than our lakeland farmsteads and ruins. And I don't eat much. My hands tightened on the rail. You've come from the war. The man tucked his chin with a passable country respect. You by any chance pass a man on the road shorter than you, a few inches? I worked to keep my voice casual. 27, dark skin, brown eyes, name of Thomas Clarland? The stranger pressed his lips together, a hair's width, no farther. I'm afraid I've not passed any travelers in some weeks. A tiny shudder moved through me from the rib cage down. I shut my eyes against it, against the empty road and the room I'd made of the farm Tom, Martha, and I had built together. We don't take on help past harvest, I said hollowly. His starved face emptied like a water bucket. All I could see inside it was some black-haired mother and her sister pacing behind wood walls, weeks north, her door left unlatched past midnight in case he arrived before dawn. Look, I can spare some apples. I'll give you apples if you just go home. Frustration beat hollow fists against my temples. Tom, if you've hired on somewhere, your people don't know if you're alive or dead. You can't do that to them. His smile twisted like a scar. Don't worry, he said crisply. No one's waiting for me to turn life normal again. I flinched. That wasn't why I wanted Tom home. That wasn't it at all. Something in his eyes flinched back. That anti-smile faltered. I'm sorry, he said, humbler. You're being kind, and I was just snide. I blinked. Kind? I'd done everything but run him off. He lifted his chin and regarded me, a girl too sunburned to be pretty and too small to throw him bodily off the kitchen porch. He looked at this, and he gestured down from that soft North Country accent to tattered shirt sleeves and the leak of sweat, and saw a man someone might wait for. I'd done everything but run him off. I hadn't run him off. And for that, no one had ever called me kind before. So if it's too late for harvest, he finished, oblivious to my surprise. I'll help however I can. I bit back the automatic response. I can do this, the ugly chorus of every fight Martha and I had ever had, with the ghosts of Papa and Uncle Matthias hovering over our shoulders. I can run this farm. I can earn my keep if you just give me a little more time. I had to, so Tom had somewhere to come home to. So Martha and I could laugh again, build pillow forts under the table like we did when I was young. So we could raise her almost child together in our own house. A house where everyone knew the younger Hoffman sister was still half owner of Roadstead Farm. I looked down across the soft gray fields to the thick green of the changeable river that cradled us in its hand. Between them, the cherry trees flung their branches stark against the sunset. The goats lay in their paddock, curled around each other to sleep. You could see every speck of Hoffman land from this spot. On a clear night, you could see all the way to the stars. The half-full woodpile, the broken wagon wheel sunk in mud, and one stranger, strong and grateful just for shelter, the kind who would just move on to the next town if Roadstead Farm blew away into dust. If the man in front of me could help this farm work right, things might be good between Martha and I again, even if he was 2 inches too tall to be Tom. And then it wouldn't matter if Martha didn't understand me, because I'd never let her down again. All right, we'll stop there. Thank you so much.
That was fantastic, Leah. You had us completely in the palm of your hand. So I did post Leah's website up there so you can find out more. And obviously there is the book title, so you can go out and grab your own copy. All right. Our fourth reader today is J.F. Garrard. J.F. is an award-winning speculative fiction writer, editor, and publisher. She is the president of Dark Helix Press, co-president for the Canadian Authors Association Toronto branch, and deputy editor for Rice Paper magazine. You'll find her portfolio of books and short fiction on her website, which I'll be posting in the chat box in just a moment, and also follow her on Twitter. Thanks so much for joining us today, JF.
Thank you. I'd like to apologize for my voice. I'm pretty sure I have COVID at this point since everyone else has COVID in my household, but I keep testing negative. Anyhow, I'd like to thank the organizers for organizing this event. It's really great to have an event to promote female authors. I'd also like to dedicate this reading to my grandmother who passed away Valentine's Day this year. So The Undead Sorceress was inspired by her. A few years ago, she had a stroke. Oh gosh, maybe it's 20 years ago now, not a few years ago. She had a stroke and I told her, I pray to the gods that, to take away years of my life to give to you. And she just looked at me and she's like, wow, you're pretty stupid to want to give away years of your life to someone else. And that sparked the idea. What if it could happen? What if my grandmother could take away years of my life? So in this story, Tamara is a boring hospital administrator. And one day her grandmother asked her that, I'm very sick. I'm going to die. Could you give me your soul? And Tamara actually says yes. But because she's a vampire, she can't. So her grandmother ends up taking her daughter's life. And the whole book is like a hero's journey of Tamara chasing down her grandmother, pretty much. The scene I'm going to read is what happens after Tamara discovers she's accidentally turned into a vampire and what to expect. So she's talking to Gia, who's her cousin, her, I guess, master, the person that turns you into a vampire. So this is the scene that takes place. The book's set in modern times. And it's an urban fantasy, okay? Tamara says, what happened to me? Am I going to live forever? Will I have to suck blood from my family? Will vampire hunters be coming after me? Gia gave her a pack of tissues and waited patiently until the rants died down. Tamara, vampires do not drink blood other than at their initiation ritual. I needed to give you my blood in order to tie our bonds and to activate our mind chips, as I am your master and will be responsible for you. Mind chips? What is that? In the last decade, an invention called the mind chip was surgically implanted into vampires and their masters. One was put into you before we buried you. We use it to communicate to each other via psychic signals, like a walkie-talkie. So if you're too far away, it might not work, and we have to give permission to accept each other's calls. I've never tried this. Since you're the first vampire I've ever successfully turned, we can try it later tonight. Gia sat on her bed in pajamas, brushing her long hair. So am I really dead? What will I eat? Tamara asked. Yes and no, Gia answered. You're an undead, but because you are alive, you are not really dead. We still have physiological systems that work similar to humans, but we cannot generate chi. Do you know what that is? Well, chi is a life force generated by living things, I think. Tamara was thankful for Gia's soothing effect on her when she realized she had calmed enough not to stutter. So the difference between vampires and humans is that we can't generate our own chi energy. We have to take it from living things in order to stay alive. We have other abilities, such as being able to heal our flesh wounds and being able to move very quickly. Gia demonstrated by running around the room so fast that she was a blur, and suddenly she was back in her seat again, patiently continuing with her explanations. Since the house was established, one of the first laws passed was that we are all to convert to feeding the same way as Eastern vampires. All living creatures on this earth have chi or energy which gives them life. Traditionally, many vampires used to feed on blood to gain chi. However, Eastern vampires just fed off chi directly, with no need to kill or gather blood. As long as there is an energy source, vampires can feed off of that and survive. Tamara frowned. I guess I can't eat chocolate anymore. Gia laughed. Actually, you can still eat food if you want. Cooked foods just don't have much chi energy. You need to remember to wash down any food with lots of water or liquids to clear out the ashes out of your system. Our bodies process things a bit differently than humans. She grabbed her right hand and positioned their hands palm to palm. Tamara, close your eyes and feel the warmth coming from my hand. Tamara gasped when she felt the heat from Gia's hand, complete with an instinct to try to capture the warmth somehow, and she felt fangs emerge from her mouth. Did you feel like you wanted the warmth but didn't know how to take it? Gia asked. Tamara nodded bashfully. You will start feeling the chi from every living creature whenever you feel hungry. Tonight, I'll teach you the basics so you won't starve or want to bite people. But be careful. Taking a little bit of chi energy from a person, animal, or plant is fine, but when you start taking too much, they will wilt and die. This used to occur quite frequently in the past when more vampires could use magic and needed more chi to cast spells. Magic? That's not real. Well, many humans and vampires used to have magic, Gia explained. So many wars were started because of this. During the Great War of Fire in the 1800s, which was in Antarctica, vampires and magic users that were sorcerers and warlocks joined forces together to battle an evil being called Mammon and his yokai. To stop Mammon, the property of water was changed, which trapped him and his yokai monsters in the South and North Poles. His head is in the north and body in the south. However, this subdued all magic on Earth after the contaminants escaped into the ocean, and only those with the strongest magic abilities kept their talents. We believe it has to do with genetic structure and have been researching this matter by following descendants of those who used magic to fight in the war. Your family is one we've been watching for a long time. My ancestors were sorcerers and warlocks? Are they still alive? Are they vampires? Gia frowned. Your family is a line of magic users, but I don't think any of them became vampires. It's rare nowadays that a sorceress, warlock, or even a human can be turned into a vampire. Something changed after the water was altered. But why some humans can become vampires, no one really knows. I do hope you have some magic. It could be useful in the future in case there are any battles. Tamara suddenly felt very tired. This was all surreal, and she wasn't sure if she was happy or sad that she was alive. She was startled out of her thoughts when Gia opened a small box and started prepping a needle full of clear liquid. What is that? You have to be vaccinated. All that stuff about vampires burning up in the sun and being allergic to garlic, well, we have a vaccine for that now. This will allow you to function in daylight and not be burned by silver, etc. Can you pass me that instruction sheet? It's my first time doing it. Opening the piece of paper, Tamara noted that it was just an injection into the thigh. Gia, it's okay, I can do it myself. I used to work as a nurse in the hospital, so I've given lots of injections. Oh, great, here you go. Gia gladly handled over the needle. And I think I'll stop here. I'm not sure if I can go on without coughing. But thank you very much for taking the time to attend this event, and thank you once again to the organizer.
Wow, JF, that was a fantastic reading. We were enjoying that so much. I love the combination of family tension and humor and magic as well as rationality. That's just sounds like so much fun. So, thank you so much for that reading. Our final reader for the day is Cerece Rennie Murphy. National best-selling and award-winning author Cerece Rennie Murphy has published 10 novels, children's books, and short stories. She is also the founder of Virtuous Con, an online convention that celebrates the excellence of BIPOC creators in speculative fiction. To learn more about the author, please visit her website, and I will post that over there in the chat box. Thank you so much for coming today, Cerece. Can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for having me. Thanks again to the organizers. I am going to read from Between Two Seas, and it's, as I said, it's a collection of 4 short stories, as Elaine said, and I'm going to read from the last one, called Human, which is about a woman who decides that Earth is where she wants to be. All right. Miss Moonkind, step behind me and draw your weapon. Following his gaze, I saw the source of our peril. 2 bounty hunters, 1 human, 1 Teora, staring at us from across the room. I thought you'd agreed to call me Stella, I joked. The tension had the odd effect of making me slightly giddy, which was not an emotion I had experienced before. But then again, neither was the fear of dying. The notion that I could be funny startled me. I let out a short burst of laughter. How likely are they to open fire in a crowd? Sterling asked, rightly ignoring me. I glanced down to find his pistols cocked and ready. Normally, we would not risk it, but I don't imagine the normal circumstances apply, I whispered back. They will do what is necessary to get the child. They do realize they can't have the baby without taking you with them alive. I'm not sure that has occurred to them. Sterling's response was to press his body closer to mine. I pulled my pistol out from the pocket of my skirt, holding the firearm in my right hand while my left wrapped around his waist. We don't have names where I come from, at least none that can be pronounced with human vocal cords. But if we did, I would name the bounty hunters they sent to kidnap me something akin to Slick and Cold. I could sense their consciousness like a worm eating through my faith in our survival. Without a moment's hesitation for the harm they would cause, the first Teora grabbed one of the kerosene lanterns that hung above the bar and threw it into the crowd. Oil spilled onto the tables and floor and quickly caught fire. For a moment, my view of them was obscured by the rush of men and women scattering like fleas from a beaten rug. The fire spread, leaping from one table to another, and for a moment, I could not look away. There is nothing like fire at home, nothing that gives off such seductive heat. Great God. The sound of Sterling's soft gasp drew my attention, forcing my eyes back to the threat before us. The second Teora had arrived, and with one common purpose, the husks of their human bodies began to pull away. Their lone human companion stumbled back, surprised, as the faces of the men he thought he knew stretched out, taking up twice the size of any normal human head, until it settled into the wide, oblong shape of my people. Their skin, once riddled with stubble and pockmarks, turned from ruddy pale to translucent pink. The small ears that hung from the side of their heads split into 3 tendrils that could both hear every sound better than any human could hope to, and taste the surrounding air. Hundreds of delicate cilia sprouted from the lining of each tentacle, ensuring that the slightest movement would not go unnoticed. Powerful arms stretched through the leather of their worn jackets until webbed hands hung far past their cuffs and thick webbed toes burst from the seams of their boots. What the hell is going on? The human companion bellowed, but the poor man would never get a chance to find out. The second Teora raised a long, webbed finger and pulled the trigger of their gun, putting a bullet through his left eye. Sterling grew dangerously still while I shuddered, rattled by the sight of my kin acting in cold blood. I had never seen another one of our kind in true form outside the dark waters of our home. With the fire raging between us, making everything dry and hot, and the sky a broad stroke of pale sapphire rushing past our moving train, they looked truly out of place, though in truth, I had no more right to be here than they did. I was still an imposter, hiding my true nature under my ability to mimic other life. Yet I felt different. I had traveled many worlds, shaping myself to the environment so that I might go unnoticed as I observed the universe. But never had I wanted to be seen until I came here. Whether I belonged or not no longer mattered. From the moment I smelled the hot air and opened my eyes to the beauty of this place, I understood. All my life I had been trying on other people's lives, other people's bodies, until finally I found the one shape that defined not who I had been, but who I wanted to become. A person, a she, a woman. My eyes stung, gazing at the embodiment of all I had been. I did not belong here either, but I wanted to desperately, to become myself at last. Teora, give us the offspring and we will leave you to your fate. Their voices betrayed only a hint of anger, but I could sense their essence burning, alight with rage. The heat from the fire was becoming almost unbearable, consuming the space between us. Beside me, Sterling's nose was covered with the bandana he wore around his neck, frantically searching for an exit. We are inseparable, I replied. Their eyes narrowed, searching our connection for a trace of untruth they would not find. With no real understanding of the mechanics of gestation, the thought that I could not simply hand my child over had not occurred to them. Then you will come with us. Because our vocal cords are not shaped in the same way that humans are, speech outside of water is different. Instead of the fluid ribbon of sounds that make up the language patterns of human speech, our language is more like a series of clicks, almost too low for human ears to perceive. So I did not expect Sterling to react when they spoke. Yet in an instant he was between us, shielding my body with his, and two guns pointed at my kin. She's not going with you. His voice was quiet, yet there was no mistaking the certainty in it. Relieved, I inhaled and immediately began choking on the smoke. My kin stared back at Sterling, puzzled. Does the human understand us? Until that moment, we'd spoken in our native language, but I replied in English, refusing to isolate Sterling any more than he already was. With a pang of regret, I realized that in my fixation to protect my child, I had placed him in danger. As capable as Sterling was, he was outnumbered, the only human in a room full of aliens. I don't know, but he senses more than most. Regardless, he is not Teora. We must protect our own. I'm no longer one of you. Their tendrils twitched in confusion. You have formed another union. I could feel the skepticism as they glanced between Sterling and I. They sensed our connection, the unconscious need to be near one another, but it was not a feeling they understood. It was nothing like the bond of our species. There was too much emotion, too much heat, too much uncertainty. The pair of Teora looked at one another. No, I replied. I belong only to myself. There is no word for alone in our language, no concept of self as something that exists outside of the whole. You cannot break with us, they struggled, to even find the words. I'm trying to, I thought. I already have, I said, stepping closest to Sterling, seeking the strength and courage his proximity inspired in me. How strong are your kind, Sterling whispered. Stronger than yours. So don't get in a tussle. Not if you can help it. Got it. Sterling fired, well before I saw him move or register the T in the last syllable he uttered. The echo from the first crack of gunfire drowned out the next 7 shots he made, square and true, before my kin could fire back. With 4 hits to the chest each, they shouldn't have been able to fire back, but after a moment of clear distress, they did. Luckily, Sterling was faster, kicking over a table for us to hide behind. He pulled me to the ground beside him. So bullets don't penetrate, he said, observing with dismay. He said, obviously dismayed by the effect his perfect aim seemed to lack. Not at that range. The impact slows us down a bit, but we spend most of our time underwater. You develop a tough skin. I thought you said you killed one of them with that pistol. The pistol helped, but I had to take them down with a cast iron skillet, then strangle them with the hem of my skirt. Sterling turned his attention from the fire and the hail of bullets. For one brief, incredulous second, he looked at me. You didn't tell me I needed a skirt. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much.
That was fantastic, Cerece. Thank you. That was great. And that's like the perfect end line. Really appreciated that. Okay, so this is the point where I thank everybody so much for coming. I thank the authors for their readings today. If you liked the authors, be sure to spread the word, follow them on social media, go to their websites and follow those newsletters.